What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the podcast. I've got a short, value-packed episode today from Haley, who has got her first house hack in Sacramento and talks through the process of getting her house, of creating financial freedom through it, and just really some of the nuances that go into living in the home. I find some really interesting things about this episode. One, she talks a lot about the things that we talk about a lot on this episode. She talks about parking. She talks about vetting tenants in a way where you've got to use when you're living in the home, you want to use a certain amount of gut feel in addition to some metrics that you're using to actually vet these tenants. But what I really appreciate is that Haley is out there not just doing this herself, but she's helping other people get into this house hacking game. And she really explains how easy it can be if you're just willing to take that leap of faith and jump in and start this asset class. And I think it's really cool too, because you can get a primary residence once every year. People forget this, but you can go buy a house, live in it for a year, convert it to a full co-living house, and then move on to the next one and get another primary residence, which is a super cool strategy. We kind of forget to talk about that in this episode, but it definitely plays in to what she's going to be talking about today. Enjoy this episode. We'll see you on the end. I'll start by asking you this. I saw a post the other day that you made on your Instagram where you said, how I made $50,000 in 2023 from house hacking. Awesome post, by the way. But before we get into how you did make $50,000 in 2023 from house hacking, I'd like to just find out a little bit about that's Haley now. Haley's a house hacker. She's a realtor who helps other people get into house hacking homes and create passive income, create some financial freedom in their lives. But before we get into all of that, Haley, what I'd love to ask is, who were you before you even started this journey? And how did you get started in this journey of house hacking?
Yeah, for sure. So, about 5 years ago, I didn't know anything about real estate. I was working as a travel occupational therapist at the time here in California. And I actually had a friend introduce me to real estate investing. It was basically one conversation about real estate investing that made me really interested. I feel like I was hooked instantly. So he introduced me to Bigger Pockets. I listened to all the Bigger Pockets podcasts that I could. I started reading the books, and I just knew that investing in real estate was for me. I knew that it was one of the best ways to build wealth. And I also thought I was going to enjoy the process, like pretty analytical. Just the idea of analyzing properties to determine like which property would be a good investment sounded really appealing to me. So I knew I wanted to get into real estate kind of like right away after I heard about it. And so I was trying to decide between two different strategies, basically. So I was trying to decide between house hacking here in California or if I should buy an investment property somewhere out of state. Because everyone kept saying like, oh, you can't invest in California. Like prices are too high. It's a very tenant friendly state. Oh, you have to invest out of state. That's where you get the cash flow. The properties are so much cheaper. It's where the landlord friendly properties are. So I was kind of leaning towards going out of state to buy my first property, but I ultimately decided to house hack and buy a primary residence in California. And I think the biggest factor actually was realizing that owning a property in California is probably going to appreciate a lot more than maybe like another property out of state. So I was like, ooh, what can I do to own a property here in my own backyard? Because I think it's going to build me more wealth in the future. So before I knew anything about real estate, I thought you had to put 20% down. So knowing that I could put, 3.5% to 5% down, I think that was also really big. So that allowed me, only putting 5% down on the primary residence to buy an asset that's going to appreciate a lot in the future. I think that is actually what prompted me to initially buy an owner-occupied property in California, in Sacramento specifically. And then I just, renting out the rooms, house hacking just made sense to me.
Yeah, it's really cool because you're right. A lot of strategies don't make sense because they don't cash flow anymore, right? So like we used to be able to buy a single family house and rent it and make some money. And now it's like very difficult to do that. I mean, virtually impossible unless you're getting like a crazy low off-market deal that you've, cold called and house and knocked on doors to try to find, right? This crazy great deal, this unicorn type deal. So I love what you're saying. And that is, I think a lot of people listening to this podcast, they're interested in co-living, or they're already doing co-living. They're trying to get the new insights about how to stay on the cutting edge of the co-living space. And I think it's just a cool point that you've kicked off here with, which is like, co-living is the only strategy that really was easy to get into for you and worked right from the get-go. Mm-hmm. What was it about the house hacking? So was there anything else about the house hacking other than the fact that it worked that made you want to like pursue this strategy?
Yeah, I just thought the concept of renting out bedrooms in your house was a great way to make money. So yes, I could have bought a house and not house hacked and accumulated a lot of wealth, but renting out a lot of bedrooms, I just realized like, hey, like I can actually make a good amount of money like on the side. So I kind of just considered it a really good side hustle. And then I could also have plenty of time to, do my other full-time job. So it was really just about saving money to then, accumulate more money so then I can buy another property in the future. So I know house hacking's not for everyone, especially like with room rentals, because you have to share a lot of space with people. But I've always been somewhat comfortable with that because I've always been a pretty frugal person. Even before buying my house, I've always rented rooms from people to save money. So I was coming into this already being familiar with the room rental and co-living strategy. So it just made sense to me. It's just a great way to earn somewhat passive income. It's not completely passive, but it still allows you to do like another full-time job.
So let's talk about it. If you wouldn't mind, let's talk about your first deal. Do you mind me asking, I'd love to know what you bought it for. I'd love to know kind of some of the finances of it. I think it'd be really interesting for our listeners. And then kind of fast forward and tell us about that journey of getting that house all the way until where you can say, hey, you made 50 grand from it last year.
Yeah, for sure. So I bought my house here in Sacramento. I'm originally from the Bay Area and would have loved to have bought in the Bay Area, but the median price point where I'm from is actually, I think it's like over $1.5 million. So I was like, what's the next best market that I can afford where people are moving to and all that? So ultimately I decided to buy in Sacramento. Originally I wanted to do the room rentals. I thought it was just like the easiest strategy. There's so many single families out there as opposed to multifamily. So I stumbled upon a single family house. I ultimately bought it for $560 with 5% down. I did buy it 3 years ago when interest rates were super low. So I did get pretty lucky with that. It was actually on the market for a while. I think it was because it was a for sale by owner and they originally overpriced the home by quite a bit. And I don't think, I think people were missing it because like the square footage didn't reflect the ADU. So it's a single family house with an ADU and some people were missing that. So I did get it below list price after it's been on the market for a while. So yeah, that's just a little bit about the numbers.
An ADU, for anybody not familiar with that, is an accessory dwelling unit. So it had like a little extra, a little outbuilding or something that people were using? Or what was the ADU like?
Yeah, it's like a guest house. Some ADUs are attached to the house, like they share a wall with the main house, and some ADUs are detached from the house. That means they're separate, but still part of the property. So mine is attached. It shares a wall with one of the other bedrooms, but it's totally separate. It has its own separate entrance, separate everything except the laundry. So the person living in the ADU does have to come into my house to use the laundry.
Got it. Okay. So you bought a house for $560 at 5% down, which if my math is correct, that's 25, let's call it my math, $27,000 or so that you had to put down on this home, plus additional closing costs and things, but still pretty cool that you could buy over a $500,000 house for only $27,000 down, or, rough math there. But how did you tell us a little bit about the interior of the home? Did you change it to have additional bedrooms? Did it already have enough bedrooms? How many bedrooms did you end up renting out in that? How did you hack it exactly?
Yeah, so what first caught my eye about this house was, of course, the ADU. The ADUs are so hard to find, fairly old. And I just knew that if I had an ADU to rent out, it would increase my cash flow. But not only did I like that it had an ADU, but it also had 4 other rooms that I could rent out in the main house. So just doing the numbers in my head, I knew this was a property that could bring in a lot more in rental income than a lot of the other properties on the market. So technically it only has 3 bedrooms, but the 4th room, it's kind of like a breezeway that was converted to a bonus room, but it is completely separate. So basically I've been using it as a 4th bedroom. So yeah, I live in one of the bedrooms. I rent out the 3 other bedrooms, and then I rent out my ADU as well. And I only have 1 bathroom to share with the members in my main house.
So 4 people in the main house, and then you rent out the ADU separately. Awesome.
Exactly.
In Sacramento, what does the ADU go for? We have people that listen to this from all over the United States. What do things rent for in that area from a bedroom and ADU standpoint?
So for ADUs, first when I got my ADU, I rented it out as a long-term rental, and I charged $1,650, including utilities. Then after I changed it to a medium-term rental, my first guest I charged $2,000. And then my next guest, I'm charging $2,150 because the demand has been pretty good for the ADU for the midterm rentals. And then for bedrooms, I would say for long-term rentals, bedrooms go for about $800 to $1,000, and then just maybe a couple $100 more for medium-term rentals.
So this home, and I'm trying to give people a sense for what the price of the home is versus what it brings in. So including you living there, let's say, I don't know what the specific numbers are on those 3 bedrooms. Maybe you have those numbers. I know it kind of fluctuates whether you do midterm or long-term, but you have $2,150 bringing in from the ADU plus, what's the average on the other 3? $850? Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I would say 900 average.
So 900 average on the other, so 9, 18, 27. So it's 2,700. So in total, you've got $4,850, and you're living there. So you're producing almost basically $5,000 a month, plus you're living there for free.
Exactly.
How cool is that?
It's amazing. I don't know why other people don't house hack like this.
Haley, why don't other people do this, do you think? Because now you work as an agent, you're helping people find a house that fits this model. Why don't other people start their journey, or even in their journey? Why don't other people, you think, do this?
That's a really good question. And I actually asked people on my Instagram story because I was really curious. I wanted to know what the reason was that was keeping people from house hacking. And the number one reason was that people did not want to give up their comfort, and they didn't want to share space with other people. So that was the number one reason for people not wanting to house hack. So then it kind of got my minds going. I was wondering, well, what are some things I can say to these people to make them feel more comfortable with sharing space with people? Because I'm pretty, even though I'm an introvert, I'm still very comfortable with it. So I'm like, what misconceptions do people have? So it made me just think about like how important screening tenants are to get like a good tenant in there. And then it also made me think about different ways you can like split up your house so that maybe you create a unit that's completely private for a tenant and you don't have to share any space with anyone.
When you did that, so you're saying, I know you came up with something called the the profit to comfort spectrum. I want you to talk about that here for a moment. But you're saying creating separate spaces like ADUs. Is that what you mean by separate spaces for people to use makes people feel more comfortable?
Yeah, so you can buy a house with an ADU, but the inventory for houses with ADUs is pretty low. So you can be a little creative and get a single family house and maybe create an ADU out of the existing square footage.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite ways to do that on a lower budget is to get a master bedroom that has a door leading to the backyard. And then you can turn that master bedroom into its own separate studio unit. And that way it's completely private from the rest of the house where you want to live.
So what you're basically saying is like more people would house hack if you could find a home that had separate entrances so people didn't always have to walk through the same common space, and had their own little kitchen so they didn't have to share the kitchen. So in a perfect world, this would be a house that had 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 separate entrances, all with mini little kitchens in them, so that whoever owns the home and is living there could just have their own space.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings up an interesting point, Haley. And I know you didn't decide to do this, but you could have bought this house. You lived in the ADU, so you had complete your own complete space and then just rented out all the rooms of the primary house. And then you would have had the comfort of your own place. Why didn't you decide to do that? Just out of curiosity.
So that's a really good question. Yeah, and that brings us back to the comfort and the profit spectrum. So when it comes to house hacking, and actually like a lot of other areas in life, the more you're on the profit side, so the more you want to make money, the more successful you want to be, the more comfort you're going to have to sacrifice. Okay. So I wanted to be the most profitable that I could be. And I also realized that I was willing to sacrifice some of my comfort. So if I were to live in the ADU and rent out the other bedrooms in my house, I would be a little bit more comfortable, like you said, because I would have my own space, but I wouldn't be making as much money as if I'm doing what I'm doing now, and that's living in one of the bedrooms and then renting out the other bedrooms plus the ADU. So I would just say that I'm higher on that profit side of the spectrum, and I'm okay with sacrificing some comfort, at least in the short term. I'm not going to house hack like this forever, but that's kind of where I fall because I want to get the most profit. And that's what people have to ask themselves, is where they fall on the spectrum. Like, you don't have to do what I do. You don't have to share space with 3 other people in order to house hack and to build wealth. If you are more on that comfort side, that's totally okay. You are more than welcome to live in a house by yourself and rent out the ADU, but just know that you're not going to make as much profit as maybe some of the other strategies, like sharing rooms with more people.
Beautifully said. I found that to be very true in my own life. Of like, look, the harder I push and the bigger goals I have and dreams, it just means I have to push through different things. And I think, I always tell people, it's always interesting to take this comfort and profit spectrum and kind of compare it to something, though, because I think the alternatives are like investing in your 401k, let's just say. But like, how comfortable is it really to wait 60 years for something to grow, hopefully, and then hope it has enough money to retire, versus what you're doing and what you've been able to accomplish in a much shorter period of time. And it's like, well, I always think about that. I'm always like, okay, I get that it's, if I have to sacrifice, because I lived in homes for 13 and a half years. I lived in co-living homes, Haley, for 13 and a half years. And I always think about, like, I was willing to sacrifice that. But in my head, the reason I was willing to make that sacrifice was because doing the other version, doing the 401k, putting money in stocks and bonds, that was a bigger sacrifice. I was like, screw that. That's terrible. That's very uncomfortable to have to sit there and do this 9 to 5 for 40, 50, 60 years. Like, screw that. I'm going to do something that's like, it's more uncomfortable maybe in the short term, but it's like you're trading where your comfort's coming from, right? And now you will have the same thing. Like, we have more freedom because we push through that. So I really like the way you're explaining it. You're explaining it in a really, really big way. So here's my question for you, Haley. What advice would you have for somebody who wants to get into this then? They kind of get this and they're like, okay, I'm willing to trade the discomfort of living with some people for a while, trade that discomfort for the discomfort of waiting 60 years for me to hopefully retire from a 401k. What advice would you have on someone looking to get in that first home that doesn't have a lot of capital? They don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting around. Maybe they have a few $1,000s. Or how would you recommend that they first get started, and just any advice you have for them?
Yeah, so if it's their first time buying a house, of course, they're limited on capital, I would first reach out to a lender to see, make sure they have enough capital to actually buy a house, and look at the numbers in a little bit more detail. Make sure they can get pre-approved for a house and that they have enough money for a down payment, because primary residence is only like 3.5% to 5%. Sometimes 3% is all you need for a down payment. So yeah, I would first reach out to a lender, and then most real estate agents can help you determine what your mortgage payments are going to be like. But if you want to know if you can qualify, definitely reach out to a lender to help you with that. But I would definitely also reach out to someone in your market that has experience with house hacking. I know I'm a real estate agent, and so I'm a little bit biased, but I would definitely say reach out to a real estate agent who has a lot of experience in this area, because I feel like each market is going to be different in some ways. There's going to be some house hacking strategies that might work a little bit better in other markets. So For example, you hear a lot about house hacking. You hear a lot about duplexes. Like house hacking just means buying a duplex, living in one side and renting out the other side. But here in California, you can definitely still house hack with a duplex, but there's still a lot of challenges that come with it. For example, a lot of the duplexes are already tenant occupied, and we have pretty strict landlord-tenant laws, so it's hard to evict tenants when there's already a tenant in there, and we have rent control. So I think just talking to a real estate agent who's experienced with house hacking can be good to know like what strategy is most popular in your market. Because the strategy that the room rental strategy, the co-living strategy, is actually the most popular house hacking strategy in Sacramento. So I would definitely reach out to, someone with experience in that, and they can kind of guide you into like other considerations that you'll want to think about when it comes to house hacking, like looking for homes with the good amount of parking, just making sure, helping you with your goals, helping you figure out where you do land on that profit and comfort spectrum, and running you through like your different options.
I love that. Could you talk to us a little bit about how you do vet your tenants and how you find new tenants or members for your home?
Yeah, so right now, my ADU is a midterm rental, and one of the bedrooms is a midterm rental. And then two of my other bedrooms are long-term rentals. So the way I vet my tenants are a little bit different between my medium term and my long term. So when it comes to long term, I'm normally a little bit more picky because these people are going to be living in my house for a longer period of time. I think I've only had like 5 or 6 different long-term tenants, but normally when it comes to long-term, because I'm sharing space with them for a longer period of time, I really want to get to know who they are as a person. So I ask them questions like, what does your daily schedule look like? Or what habits do you have? Have you had roommates in the past? What has your experience been like with roommates? You're basically trying to ask them a lot of questions to get to know who they are and whether or not you would feel comfortable living with this person. And you also have to use your gut feeling as well, because I didn't really do that my first time when I was trying to get my first long-term tenant. I was super eager to get.
You were excited. We've all been there, Haley. We've all done it. I can think of several stories. Don't feel bad. We're like, what? You have a pulse and you can pay, and like you'll pay the rent? Like, sure. No, please continue.
No, that's exactly what I was like in the very beginning. Like, I was looking for roommates even before I closed on my house. Like, I couldn't even actually show them the property because I wasn't the true owner of the property yet. So I was just super eager. But now I know, just take it slow, get to know them. It's okay to say no if something doesn't feel right. Just use your gut feeling. So that's my advice with long term.
Okay, so you kind of do this like interview process. You really find out about them. You want to find out about a day in the life of them, and then also just have this like gut feeling, which is that they're going to be a good fit for you. Because ultimately, when you're house hacking is when you're living in that home. Where do you get the leads initially? Where do you get the prospective tenants initially? And I have to circle back around and ask you about what happened to that first person and what the story was behind that. We can't just leave that as an open loop. We've got to tell that part of the story too.
For sure. So for long-term tenants, I've been using Facebook Marketplace, and that's been going really, really well. So the very first time I put, I think, 2 of my bedrooms and the ADU on Facebook Marketplace, and I got over 150 responses from people. Like, I was blown away. I think one of the reasons was that one of my rooms was pretty small, so I was not charging a lot in the beginning. And so I think that's what ultimately attracted so many people. But yeah, I was just kind of blown away that Facebook Marketplace, is a good place to find roommates. So I think I found all of my long-term roommates on Facebook Marketplace, except for one, actually, I found on Airbnb. They reached out to me and asked if they could actually stay in the property long-term. Because originally I only had, I had 2 midterm rooms originally, and then I converted one to a long-term because someone wanted to stay longer.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. And then back to your question about what happened to the first tenant. Yeah. I think the problem was I didn't trust my gut. So I didn't ask her a lot of questions, and she moved in, and it's not like one thing happened, but it was kind of just like a series of little things, and then just realizing her character as a person. Like the things she was saying, I could tell she was lying, and she's just being a little manipulative. So, unfortunately, I don't have a really good story. Just knowing that this person I can't continue to live with. I felt like every day I walked through my front door, just felt like this negative energy, just knowing she was living in my house. So,
how did you deal with it? How did you get her out, or how did you do it?
Yeah. Just a 30-day notice to move out, and it was fine after that. So a little awkward, of course, but
But I think that's a great story for like, hey, these things can happen when you're house hacking, but you also can give notices to making sure you have the right agreement. You also can give notices for people to leave.
Yes.
And like, that's part of this game, right? That's part of what we get to do. And so I think that that's really cool that it's like, yes, it was an issue. And yes, that's how you wrapped it up. I love that. What about, I'm really curious, Haley, it's kind of a detailed question, but do you handle pets? Like, do you allow people to bring their pets? How do you handle that? I'm really curious. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. So originally one of the issues with this first roommate is that she did have a dog, and, I was kind of uneasy about allowing pets in my home. I really like dogs. So I was like, oh, sure, that should be fine. Because she told me, oh, the dog it doesn't bark hardly at all. It gets along with everybody. But then the dog moved in, and that wasn't true. The dog barked at every single person it didn't know as they walked in my house.
Did you meet the dog beforehand or no?
I did, but it was different.
It was different. Once you moved in, it was different. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. I did meet the dog very briefly.
Yeah, got it.
She didn't bark at me for some reason. Maybe she just really liked me. I don't know. But it was different. The dog was just a lot louder than she, told me. And then it goes to the bathroom in my backyard, some of my grass starts, turning yellow, eating the bark on my trees. I just decided it was a good idea just not to allow pets from then on.
So what are some, Haley, and we'll kind of just, as we wrap this up, first of all, this has been great. I love hearing your story about how you just took the leap of faith, you jumped in, you got your home up and going, and then how you've created income from this. I think it's just absolutely beautiful, and I wish more people did it. I wish more people started in this way. I was talking to my nephew the other day, and I was like, you should buy a house because he's renting right now. And he was like, I don't know. I don't have that much money. And I was like, dude, you can get a house in the area where he lives. You can actually buy a house, believe it or not, for $200,000. Like, you can still buy a house, which I know. Sorry, California. This is in a little town of Amherst, Virginia.
Yeah.
And then I said, you only have to put 3 or 5% down. And there's some programs that'll let you put 0% down if it's like a little bit rural. They're called USDA. United States Department of Agriculture gives out these loans at 0% down if you're in like a rural area. I was like, you're rural enough, you might be able to get one of these. And I was like, you can house hack here and have a couple rooms. And it just blew his mind that he only needed like 3%, which is like $6,000 of $200,000.
Wow.
Like, that's nothing, right? Like, and it really blew his mind. And so I do wish more people knew that and were sharing that with people around. So if you're listening to this and you knew that and that wasn't any groundbreaking, you're probably hearing this because you need to go share or teach this to someone else so that we can start really spreading this strategy and getting people into their own homes and creating some passive income. And I really like that. But what would you say if you had to just rapid fire, Haley, as we kind of wrap this up, if you had to rapid fire through the 4 to 7 things that you think are the most important things that a house hacker, someone who's living in the home and wants to rent out the room, should look for, what would you say that those things are? Basically, I'm kind of asking, like, what do you help when someone comes to you and says, Haley, find me a co-living home or a house hacking home in Sacramento or, wherever you do your work. What are kind of the top items that they need to look for in that new home according to your formula?
Great question. So 1 is enough parking. So making sure there's enough parking either in the driveway or in front of the street. 2 would be probably the number of bathrooms. So like I said, I actually only have 1 bathroom and I share that bathroom with 4 people. It's been going okay for the most part, but... You
schedule it out or no?
No. Everyone has pretty different shower schedules, so that's been really helpful.
That's nice.
Yeah, but it will be easier to house hack the more bathrooms there are, because the more rental income you can get, and yeah, just the more people you will attract, the more bathrooms there are. And then, yeah, the more bathrooms, and it really depends on your comfort level. Sometimes with house hacking, you do want, separate spaces. Sometimes people really like two different living areas. If there's a lot of people in the house, it's good to have two different living areas for people to hang out in. You don't need to have that, but it is definitely helpful. You want to look at the location. Is it close to a hospital? Is it close to a university? Is it close to where a lot of people work? So location is important. You can house hack in more like C-class areas, but the better location, the better quality of tenants you're going to get. And I think that's really important. So I would definitely, look in a better location for house hacking. And you know what? House hacking with room rentals is honestly, it's pretty simple. It's something that you learn as you go. So you learn how to like screen tenants. I think I should have put locks on my doors in the beginning. That's something I'm learning right now. But that's not something you really look for in a house, because you can add that on to that later. But yeah, you just want, people, the better quality of house that you have, the more people are going to be attracted to it. So yeah, I think those are just some tips for,
Yeah, so looking for parking, that's definitely something I teach a lot too. Like, does it have enough parking, especially if you're in a city that needs a car, Number of bathrooms, that's huge. Kudos to you for keeping the 4-to-1 ratio and making that happen. That's awesome. Separate spaces, so I'm assuming that would include like private entrances and things like that. It would be, if it had one or two of those different entrances, like that'd be better, right?
Right, for sure.
And then location, the better quality areas is really, really, really key. So that's amazing. Well, first of all, I really appreciate you coming on and just sharing kind of your journey, your story. I really love what you've been able to do. What was it? And I know we kind of talked about this in the beginning, but I really want to find, like, what was it for you that kind of pushed you over the edge to actually go and do this? And do you think you'll do this again in another property?
Ooh. That's a good question. I think I could potentially do it again in another property. I'm not sure if I would rent out 3 other bedrooms. I think that I might, I've been so high on that profit side of the spectrum for 3 years. I think I might, move a little bit more on that comfort side of the spectrum. So do a strategy where I can have a little bit more privacy. But yeah, definitely, I think I would house hack again and accumulate another property with a low down payment. Like, that's a no-brainer for me. So yeah, I think I would definitely house hack again. I'm sorry, what was the other part of your question?
The question was just like, what was it that pushed you over the edge to like have the courage to take the leap of faith to do this?
Yeah, to be honest, I wasn't really scared about house hacking. Just because I think I really understood the benefits of it. And if you understand like how this is going to set me up in the future, like, it was kind of a no-brainer for me. I think for most of my life, I just didn't know it was possible because I didn't have that 20% down payment that I thought you had. So just knowing that you only had to put 5% down to buy a property, and just knowing like how much money you can make by renting out your other rooms, and how that would, make it so much easier to buy another property, it would be so much faster to buy another property in the future. Like, I honestly didn't have a lot of hesitations about it. Like this, I knew it's what I wanted to do.
Would you share a little bit about how someone could get in touch with you, or if they're in your market and they want to look for a great house hack, how they can use you? Would you just share a little bit about that, Haley?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Haley_househacker. So HALEY_househacker, or you can email me at HDahlgard, DAHLGARD @gmail.com.
And Haley puts out some great content. And if you're I know you're just now moving to the Bay Area. Will you be will you be doing realtor work still in Sacramento, or no? You'll be in the Bay Area. Okay, you will.
I'll be partly in the Bay Area, still house hacking in Sacramento, still keeping my room, still plan on helping clients in Sacramento. And also potentially helping clients in the Bay Area as well. So I'll be traveling back and forth and seeing how that goes.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. If you're in the Bay Area, you're in Sacramento, or you want to invest in those areas, 2 great cities, then reach out to Haley and let's get your first house hack going. Haley, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on to share your story.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
If you enjoyed this episode, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Share this with somebody who needs to do their first house hack. It's one thing to hear it from you or from me, but when I bring other guests on here that talk about their journey and the fact that their journey has not been crazy, hellacious, intense, insane. Yes, there's some bumps in the road, but to be able to produce $50,000 in cash flow from a home that she's house hacking is $50,000 that she would not have had. And she got to live in that house as well, which is pretty phenomenal. So share this with somebody that you think should begin this journey. Thank you guys. I'll see you on the next episode.